I think we're live.
We are live. Yes, indeed.
Good. How
And
are you?
I'm alive.
You're live. We're alive.
Yes.
I'm alive.
I had my Second City debut this week. It went extremely
Ah,
well. Um,
hey. Congratulations.
yes, it was really fun. And and yeah, um, just following up on our podcast from last week about humor and
About
practice.
humor.
I actually didn't this particular sketch I did, which was not about meditation. It was about childhood memories, uh, and it was really fun actually.
So, how was the difference between this one and the last one? In other words, last time you were talking about meditation, that was not Second City. That was just like a
That was at an open mic.
open
Yeah,
mic, and this
yeah.
is like a. How was the difference? What was the difference between the two?
Well, this was, the meditation one was more experimental because I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
sure what was going to happen. This
Sure.
was actually about, my father, for whatever reason, decided in the 1960s to wear a toupee. And so it was partly about that. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, you have to change the facts to
To make them
create
funny.
comic effect.
Sure.
And so it was partly about that, and it was partly about a punishment that my parents put me through when I okay, this is an admission,
You don't. You don't
when I
need to.
got my childhood friends drunk.
Oh,
This is when we were 14 or something, or
sure.
15. Yeah. I didn't get them drunk, but I was the provider of the alcohol.
Right.
So, and the punishment was torture, in a way. So it was about that. And again, it was, I had to create some uh, unfacts
Mm-hmm.
to make it funny. But it actually worked, and I was really happy with the way it came off, and
Good.
also the fact that I could pretty spontaneously add things that I hadn't anticipated putting in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, so I probably keep it up in some way. They don't have oddly they don't really have an advanced stand-up comedy class as opposed to their improv school, which is really intense.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, there was a good group of people, and I was the only uh, blanking out on the word because of that boomer. I was the only boomer in the
Oh,
class, baby
okay.
boomer in the class.
So much younger people, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, mostly millennials and Gen X.
Yeah.
There weren't any Gen Zs, thank God, but that would have been really challenging. Anyway, it was a lot of fun, and going to these open mics can be really entertaining too. So we'll see. I do want to do a longer one on meditation because, as I wrote you, and maybe some people watched it. I rewatched the Wes Isker uh, sketch that he did, which was a long piece, and it really was motivational actually. Because I think I could put at least 20 minutes together about meditation, if not a half hour. And I'll just book it as a lecture at the university and see what
Sure.
happens.
Yeah. Why not?
Anyway, so yeah. Speaking of words, I thought it would be interesting. Coleman Barks died a few days ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you've done some podcasts about him.
Videos. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
video, and I mean, he can certainly take credit for bringing Rumi into the public eye, even though into the general public's eye, or at least into a certain portion of the general public's eye,
The English public. Yeah.
yeah, the English public,
Yeah.
um, and even Sufism to some degree, because people certainly didn't, other than people who were born into that tradition, wouldn't necessarily have thought about it too much, I suppose. Um, but it kind of, as I was thinking about it this morning, and reading one of his famous reinterpretations, I guess, as well as some of his poetry,
Mm-hmm.
the whole notion of words and
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
practice, and language and practice, and
Mm-hmm.
how it can be helpful at the same time it can be a hindrance.
Yeah. It's
And
a lot of depth there.
yeah, and it's really interesting because I know as a teacher, and when I'm guiding a lot of meditations, I can often tell when somebody is like hearing the guidance and thinking about the guidance versus treating it in a very different way.
Mm.
As and of course some traditions, it's, they refer to it specifically as pointing out instructions,
Hmm.
right?
Or the difference between the finger and the moon, right? That's the
Yeah,
famous
yeah,
Zen.
that's the right.
The
And
famous
there's so
Zen.
much in that,
Yeah.
it's like, and how do we know
Mm.
when we're doing one versus the other?
Well, exactly. And I mean, I mean, a lot of the problem comes when you're beginning and you're trying to figure things out,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of that is absolutely human and natural in the
Sure.
sense that you're genuinely confused. I mean, you're genuinely trying to understand what all these crazy new ideas are all about. And you may not even know that the moon is there, and you're trying to figure out what the person's pointing at. Pointing at, I mean, is it the star over there? Is it the
Yeah.
branch that's in the way? What is he pointing at? And so yeah, I mean, some of that is something we all have to go through, I think, and is normal, and it can be helpful. Um, Let me put it this way: it can sometimes not be helpful just to say, "Oh, just look at the moon," because the person, legitimately doesn't know what you're
Oh,
talking
right.
about.
Yeah, yeah.
I
No,
mean,
they have to
legit.
start to experience the difference.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's and I mean it's really interesting. And sometimes, well, I have to point out that, like somebody will say in a class, well, I've been thinking, I think about the breath, I think about the breath, and I said, well, wait a minute, hold on a second.
Hmm.
Let's just like step aside here. And when you say you're thinking about the breath, what do you really mean? You know? And,
They've
and
never approached it that way.
Yeah,
They've,
and what I really appreciate, and I don't know that John Kabat-Zinn invented this exercise, probably not, but he certainly, again, like Coleman Barks, he made it famous, which is, the raisin eating exercise that is so
mm,
often which is part of his curriculum, the MBSR curriculum rather. When people just experience uh, an item which we consider to be food, letting the needing the words to describe the experience they are having, but actually recognizing the difference between, in a sense, the description of it and the actual feeling of it, or the experiencing of it, or the tasting of it, and usually, and it's the problem with language in general is that it takes us out of the direct experience in so many ways.
yeah, although it points us towards it, so
Yeah,
it's very useful. I mean, in fact,
well,
it's
it's not,
essential.
it's not, it's
Essential.
unavoidable.
Yeah, it's
It's not
unavoidable and
avoidable,
essential. Yeah.
even because our mind thinks in words.
Hmm.
Um, and, uh, and of course, in any given class, I want somebody to talk about their experience. So, one has to.
Hmm.
And, but that difference between thinking about the experience and trying to describe the experience and the experience itself
Mm,
is in a way I would almost like the gateway into actually,
sure.
um, you know, seeing the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very much like any kind of training. Learning an instrument or learning how to hit in baseball or whatever. Somebody will have to teach you with words, and gestures. And when you begin, you're focused on the words, and what the person's trying to get across to you. But clearly, if you're just focusing on the words, you're not going to be playing the instrument. I
Right.
mean, you're just going to be, practicing the way any beginner will. And, to an extent, I'm going to say I'm a beginner in lots of ways at this practice. And so a lot of times I'm really happy to have somebody give me a whole bunch of words to tell me what to do and why, and, so I can understand it. But you're absolutely right that I mean, there's this huge gulf that everyone has to go through if you're going to be trying to become an expert at something. It's this gulf where you begin with the words and begin with the concepts and that kind of analytical, conceptual understanding of what it is you're trying to do and why, and then trying to integrate that, into your core, into your mind, into your body, so that you can come out the other end. And thinking of Alyssa Liu, right, at in the Olympics, right? I mean, you see her on the ice, and it's just like, wow, that's somebody who's just there,
Right.
and not
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah.
All she's thinking about, it seems to be, is just how much she's enjoying.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, and that was her, just she well, she brought an attitude of non-striving in a sense,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
and this is always the problem. It's why I ask people in a class to stop reading about meditation, stop reading about mindfulness, right? Because it just creates more concepts. And
Yeah. I mean, again, it has its point, but you have to.
but in the middle of a class,
Yeah.
it also creates an expectation.
Right.
And I mean, at least according to how she was speaking before, it's like, I'm not going to say she didn't care. She did care.
She did care. Yeah.
She really, but what she cared about was having fun.
And showing
yeah.
off her art,
Yeah.
and being,
Yeah.
just, she said she
Letting
wanted
it
to
go.
show the audience how of the art, which
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or letting them experience the art.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sort of letting their striving also fall away.
Mm-hmm.
Because people were striving, wanting her to win a gold, and it's like,
yeah.
she didn't. I don't think she even cared. I mean, it was like, I mean, she must have, but it was like,
That was low down on her list. It seems like it.
Yeah,
She said she
yeah,
was
yeah.
having a good time, whatever.
Yeah, and that was so refreshing, actually,
Yeah.
because you saw the difference clearly.
Well, it's beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, and the yeah, and so when we let go of our striving attitudes when it comes to meditation, when it comes to awakening, and recognize that the words are there as a support, but they are not the thing. And can we tell the difference? It's like somebody on one of my colleagues in the stand-up class. He was one of his little part of one of his bits was talking about therapy, and how he would when he was at a party or something, he would talk about how he was in therapy. He said, yeah, I wasn't sure why I was doing that, but was it because I wanted people to think of me in a certain way, and it was like, why would you you might say I'm in therapy, but why would you actually talk about therapy in because it's sort of like, that's not what it's for. It's not, you don't take therapy to talk about being in therapy. And
Unless you're a stand-up comic, and then
well, yeah, then it's another matter. Or a therapist.
Yeah.
So it's but do we meditate so we can talk about being meditators? And I'm always almost, when somebody asks me what I do, I'm almost embarrassed to say. It's kind of like, because immediately assumptions are made, and how do we ourselves hold those assumptions?
Yep.
In that process. So, yeah, and I don't think I think that people when it comes to the work of Coleman Barks or any number of other people who interpret poetry as opposed to really translate it, there is certainly value in what they do, because they're offering, they found something in it that they're trying to share with others. And how do we receive that?
Yeah. I mean, I mean, it to get down a little bit of a rabbit hole, because, some of us, first of all, I mean, it's absolutely correct that there's this huge gulf between the conceptual understanding of anything we're trying to learn and the actual practice of it. Learning a language is the same way. And so it's important to keep that in mind. On the other hand, those of us who are beginners at whatever it is we're beginners at, it's good to keep, we'll have to keep that in the back of our mind while we're learning it, but that doesn't stop the fact that we need the conceptual stuff to begin with. It's just, essential scaffolding. Now the other thing is that,
although I will say it's interesting, like, did the Buddha have that?
Well, during the time that he was, during the time that he was in the wilderness, presumably he would have for a number of years, trying out different things and trying to understand why they didn't work or that they didn't work. And, clearly he was,
so it's actually interesting because he was kind of striving.
Well, he was, he was trying to end, get beyond death. That was the whole, the whole thing. And he, and early Buddhism is, I think, this is one of the things that I've sort of hammered on in some of my videos. Early Buddhism is more towards the striving end of things than later Buddhist framings of the practice are. Early Buddhism is all about right effort and striving and, and like your hair is on fire, right? That was kind of the way the Buddha framed these things. And look, that can be good for some of us sometimes. It certainly is good for those of us who were kind of lazy, and it's like, the pants a little bit. But.
Yeah, and of course, as he described right effort, it was like finding a balanced effort.
Right, but also a strong effort, but balanced, yes.
Yeah. Determination.
Yeah,
there's determination involved. And...
But what I was going to say about Coleman Barks is that there's this other level to it, which has to do with, in my opinion, honesty, because the Coleman Barks Rumi poems are presented as poems by Rumi, and in fact, as scholarship has shown, they aren't. And this was something that, because there's one particular one called The Guest House, which is famous. Yeah, which is the most famous, and it's a beautiful poem by Coleman Barks.
Right.
But if I went to try to find it in Rumi's poem, in an actual sort of like scholarly translation of the poems that Rumi was writing. And I of course, I don't speak Farsi. I'm just getting the English translation, so I'm at one level already.
Already removed,
and it's just not there. There's it's bits from here and bits from there, and lots of stuff that has nothing to do with anything that Rumi wrote, and other things that are huge stuff, especially material about Islam that's just completely left out. Because Rumi, Coleman Barks really wanted to secularize it, which is, I'm a secular Buddhist. I'm not against that kind of thing, but I am against not being straightforward about it.
And I wonder. You always wonder in that case, how much was his publisher and how much was him. But of course, he didn't. I don't know how. I never saw him in person, so I don't know how he introduced things. But when I was reading, evidently what his friend Robert Bly said was, release Rumi from the cage, something to that effect, right? So that it's like, if we only read him in the cage of Sufism or in the cage of Islam, we're receiving it in a particular way. I'm not defending him. I'm just, it's like an interesting way of looking at it, but
you could say the same thing about Buddhism, right? Like, release the Buddha from his cage and make it secular, right? That's what some secularists say. And again, I'm a secularist, so I'm not opposed to that general idea, but I'm opposed to saying that's correct. That's being honest to what the Buddha actually taught. And that's the problem, I think, is that he was a Sufi. He was a Muslim, and a lot. His poetry is
they're very ecstatic and no
And if you're
question.
and the other thing is that if you're just looking at Rumi thinking, okay, where is the guest house? I mean,
You won't find
okay,
it.
here's Coleman Barks's guest house. So
Yeah,
who else has translated the guest house, and
right.
how can I? There is no such thing. That poem doesn't exist
Yeah,
as such.
yeah, 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 yeah. And
Anyway,
that, yeah, no, it's
yeah,
true. And, and there's actually a guest house in the Buddhist suttas as well, which
there
is,
is, which I talk about
yeah,
at the end of the video.
yeah.
It's kind of
And
funny.
where is that anyway? What do you remember where that's found?
I don't remember
I've
because
always,
I did the video like
yeah,
5 years ago, so I don't remember exactly what it was. Yeah, it's kind of
yeah,
ironic that there is a guest house.
yeah. I mean, it's not about denigrating Coleman Barks. He's actually a pretty good poet.
Well,
You know,
yeah, it's just
it's the honesty.
it's the
It's the
honesty
same
that
thing
gets me.
came up with the first Buddhist women, and they're
Yeah,
and they're the publisher. I think corrected things.
a little bit.
Yeah, but still, one does have to credit Coleman Barks with at least bringing the name more to the general public, and
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
value in that, and there's certainly some wonderful translations, real translations out there.
They're harder to find, though. I have to say. I mean, yeah, it's tough to find a real good scholarly translation of Rumi. At least for me. I mean, maybe somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, there's
I'm not an expert on this, so
yeah, and there are neither am I, and maybe we'll hear from one.
yeah.
But it's there are scholarly translations, and then there are translations that are authentic translations, but also, and this is the case with so much poetry. When you're translating poetry into another language, but you want to maintain
Yeah.
the rhythm of the poetry and the style of the poetry, that's a real challenge.
Translating poetry
And
is
yeah, and
is
there's
hard.
some yeah, but there are I know that because in our saga we read poems every day, and some of which are certainly Rumi, but there are a bunch of other we actually most of the translations are not Coleman Barks. Most of the readings are not Coleman Barks. Have to look back. I can't remember the name of one of the common ones.
Hmm.
Uh, but even Japanese poetry is the same thing. It's like and one of our team members is Japanese, and I often, if she's there, I might request that she read it in Japanese too,
Oh yeah.
just to hear the
Hmm.
poetry of the language if you don't even know the language. But
Well,
particularly when you're translating from something that's so different
hmm.
from English as opposed to Spanish or French, but even those languages.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. I mean, there's a good sense in which poetry can't really be perfectly translated. I mean, you can say that about everything, but but poetry, I think the cadence and sounds of the words matter in a way that translating a recipe for making soup doesn't. I mean, so yeah, I
yeah,
mean that's the thing, and it's and all of the I mean, part of the thing about poetry also is the the connotations of the various words, which are different from language to language.
yeah,
I mean, a word
yeah,
in Pali or Japanese or Spanish or whatever is going to have many different connotations than its translated word in English.
yeah. No,
And so
definitely.
it's just impossible to do perfectly. And this is, I mean, to bring it back to the idea of teaching somebody about Buddhism or whatever, or how to meditate, um, that's part of the issue we have is we're dealing with translated texts, many of which are poetic. I mean, the Dhammapada is a poetic text.
Sure.
Um,
And it's probably the most translated text.
I would think so in
Yeah,
Buddhism. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. And it's fascinating how different the translations are.
Hmm.
But even as I mean, now we're sort of veering into another area. But I mean, when you look at the brilliance of Bhikkhu Nalio, who, when he translates anything, it seems he's looking at the various uses of one, an important word. He'll look at how it's used in different contexts.
Oh yeah. No, that's
And
normal.
that's
Yeah. Hmm.
so that highlights the value of a really good translation. It's like, what is the context that you're reading it in?
Yeah, and it also means that a good translator has to have a really encyclopedic knowledge of the thing that they're looking at. I mean, like
Yeah,
Bhikkhu Bodhi or Bhikkhu Sujato or Bhikkhu Analayo, they have encyclopedic knowledge of the Pali Canon and all
yeah,
of the different uses of the phrases and words in
yeah,
it, so that they're going to be able to know the context, because the context is everything when it
yeah,
comes to language.
yeah, yeah. And so the value of language and way that value, the way that language also often gets in our way.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yep.
and recognizing that difference and really, uh, I mean, that's a big part of our practice.
It
Is
is.
seeing that difference,
Yeah. And
and
so
not
those of us who are academics are just sort of like, or prior academics, we just get off on the language. It's just like
Mhm.
we like the and like people love poetry just for its
Yeah,
language. And we
yeah,
just sort of so it's a kind of a geeking out on sort of like the
yeah.
Buddhist geeking out on the linguistic issues.
Well, that's also. I mean, this is a whole other discussion, of course, and it's changed. I hear, is like in the old days, at least. When if you were a scholar of Christianity or a scholar of some version of Christianity or a scholar of Buddhism, you were looked down upon if you actually practiced in those
Right,
traditions.
right. But that's an issue of objectivity, I think, at
Right.
least within this academics, is the idea is that you have to be there's a the ideal is for you to be completely objective about the subject that you're teaching, and if you're too allied to some particular
Sure.
interpretation of that
Yeah.
because of your practice, then that can get in the way. At least that's the belief. Now,
Yeah.
what you're saying is that's tended not to be so true recently, and I think that's so. I mean, there's less of that. Although, I mean, I think there's some truth to it, right? I mean, you
Although,
know,
based on what we're talking about, though, it's like still knowing that difference.
absolutely knowing the
So,
difference and
yeah.
being open, being a practitioner who's open
Right.
is fine,
Yeah.
but being somebody who's very dogmatic or, interested in their own narrow interpretation because it's what they practice with,
Yeah.
and they're just trashing other interpretations, which I've come across sometimes, is not you know
Right.
not great.
Anyway, interesting discussion, and
Yeah.
curious to hear from people about it. And if we have any Rumi scholars, please
Yeah, that would be
step
great.
forward. And uh, one thing doesn't require much interpretation, which is coffee.
Coffee,
Coffee
I
is
think.
coffee,
Yes.
but there is the word coffee, and there is the actual experience of drinking the coffee and
Yep.
how that is experienced
Hmm.
beyond words.
Yeah, you
And
can describe the coffee, but it's not the same as drinking it.
right, and so if you'd like to support that aspect of our practice,
Hmm.
which is actually a practice, making and drinking coffee, please feel free to buy us a cup of coffee or two or three, and that will help support
Diggingthedharma.com. Yeah.
this show. And in the meantime, keep digging the Dharma.
Keep digging the Dharma. Thanks, John.
Okay, take care.
You too.